pregnant wife was bleeding. The millionaire blocked her while sleeping with his mistress. In the heart of New York City's glistening skyline, where power collides with passion and money can open any door, a shocking betrayal is about to unfold. Julia Morgan, 9 months pregnant with her first child, finds herself alone and desperate when the one person she trusts most, her husband, Adrian Morgan, blocks her calls. As she bleeds in their penthouse suite, gasping for help, Adrian is miles away, lost in a twisted romance with his mistress. Will Julia survive this harrowing night? And will Adrian's dark secret remain hidden in the shadows or be exposed by the unrelenting sting of fate? Julia Parker was a modest girl from Portland, Oregon. Raised by a single mother, she was humble, kind-hearted, and aspired to become a veterinary technician. Her days were simple, volunteering at an animal shelter and dreaming of a quiet, happy future. Everything changed one evening at a lavish charity gala in New York City, where she met Adrian Morgan, a millionaire investor known for his charm and ruthless ambition. Adrian had built a vast empire from scratch, his success the envy of many. To Julia, he seemed dazzling, sophisticated, and genuine. He was drawn instantly to her innocence and warmth, a refreshing departure from the shallow relationships he typically encountered. Their romance blossomed quickly, sweeping Julia from a modest life into a dazzling world of private jets, exotic vacations, and glamorous events. Just months into their relationship, Adrian proposed beneath the glittering lights of the Eiffel Tower. Julia eagerly accepted, enchanted by his promises of lifelong devotion. Their lavish wedding at New York's Waldorf Astoria became front-page news. Billionaire Adrian Morgan marries humble, volunteer Julia Parker. But amid the glamour, cracks began to appear. On their honeymoon in the Maldives, Julia glimpsed unsettling hints of Adrian's secretive side. His phone constantly buzzed, and private conversations occurred in hushed tones. On their final night, Adrian confessed, "I've made mistakes. I'm not perfect." Julia reassured him gently, hoping trust would overcome her lingering unease. Returning to their luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, life initially seemed perfect. Julia soon discovered she was pregnant, bringing fresh joy into their lives. Adrian was thrilled, attentive, and supportive at first, attending every doctor's appointment and doting on her. His parents, Michael and Teresa Morgan, celebrated the news, showering Julia with affection and gifts for their future grandchild. Yet as the pregnancy progressed, Adrian's business commitments multiplied, providing convenient excuses for late nights and unexplained absences. Julia's unease returned, intensified by subtle hints like unfamiliar perfume clinging to Adrian's clothes and sudden anxiety whenever she mentioned his meetings. One evening, attending a charity event, Julia noticed Adrian in a discreet exchange with a mysterious woman whose beauty was striking and whose manner intimate. Julia confronted him afterward, but Adrian brushed it aside, insisting the woman was merely a business acquaintance. He pleaded for trust, claiming the pressures of his empire required secrecy. Despite her fears, Julia clung to hope, pushing doubts aside for the sake of their unborn child. Still, Adrian's distant behavior continued, fueling her hidden despair. Amelia Cole, Julia's lifelong friend from Portland, visited often, noticing the cracks widening. Julia admitted her concerns, but remained determined to believe in Adrian's love. In private, Adrian wrestled with guilt, aware his secrets risked unraveling everything. He vowed internally to end his hidden affair, knowing Julia deserved honesty. Yet each day that passed without truth widened the gulf between them, leaving Julia increasingly isolated in a golden cage of uncertainty and suspicion. Their marriage, once a fairy tale romance, teetered dangerously on the edge of betrayal. Julia's pregnancy progressed, and with it came bouts of morning sickness and an exhaustion she had never experienced before. Yet she remained determined to be an excellent partner and soon to be mother. She relied heavily on Amelia Cole, who flew in from Portland to help when she could. Between cooking nutritious meals for Julia and organizing the nursery, Amelia quietly observed the tension building beneath the surface of her friend's marriage. Something about Adrian's sudden absences felt orchestrated. He might say he was rushing off to secure a hotel acquisition in Chicago, but Amelia once witnessed him getting into a car that never showed up on any flight manifest. On another occasion, he claimed he was with an attorney in a late-night meeting, but the attorney's office had closed hours earlier. Whenever Amelia voiced her suspicions, Julia defended Adrian passionately, yet, deep down, Julia wrestled with doubts. Everything took a turn one crisp autumn evening at a high-profile fundraiser for children's hospitals, hosted at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Julia, adorned in a flowing navy blue gown that accentuated her growing baby bump, found it difficult to stand for long periods. Adrian was the perfect gentleman at first, offering her a seat, fetching sparkling water, and checking on her well-being between hobnobbing with his wealthy acquaintances. But as the event progressed, Julia noticed a mysterious woman with ebony hair and striking emerald eyes frequently drifting in Adrian's direction. Whenever he saw her, he seemed both enticed and uneasy. Julia watched them from across the grand hall, her heart clenching in apprehension. At one point, the woman approached Adrian and discreetly slipped something into his jacket pocket. He stiffened, glancing over his shoulder before placing a hand on her wrist. She smiled in a way that made Julia's stomach turn. Back home, Julia confronted Adrian in their elegantly furnished living room. "Who was that woman at the fundraiser?" she asked, her voice quavering with a mixture of fear and anger. Adrian's expression hardened. "No one important," he said curtly. "An old acquaintance. She was just asking about a potential business venture." "Business venture?" Julia echoed, remembering how close the woman's face had been to his. She had never seen a business conversation look so intimate. Sighing, Adrian loosened his tie. "I'm under a lot of pressure. I've got investors breathing down my neck, partnerships about to fall through. I don't want to drag you into it. Let me handle things, okay?" Reluctantly, Julia nodded, but she could not dismiss the unease twisting in her gut. Something about Adrian's behavior, his abrupt defensiveness, and the clandestine way that woman had approached him, made Julia question the reality of her fairy tale life. That night, as Adrian slept soundly beside her, Julia quietly rose from bed. She tiptoed into the bathroom and emptied her heart in silent tears. She thought of her unborn child, of the cozy nursery they were preparing, and felt fear creeping up her spine. She prayed Adrian was simply protecting her from business entanglements too complicated for her to understand. But a tiny sliver of betrayal had already lodged itself in her heart, a sliver that would soon grow into a festering wound. The woman's name was Selina Clark, a 20-something former model turned socialite, originally from a small town in Texas. She had burst onto the New York social scene a year ago, swiftly making connections through exclusive parties and philanthropic events. Rumors circulated that her relationships often blurred the lines between genuine affection and strategic advantage. With her striking looks and magnetic personality, Selina excelled at drawing people in, especially powerful men. Adrian first met Selina at a private investor gathering months before his wedding. They exchanged numbers, intending to explore a real estate collaboration in high-end hospitality, but late-night planning sessions escalated into stolen kisses. By the time he was walking down the aisle with Julia, Adrian's guilt was already an uninvited guest hovering behind him. Over the subsequent months, Adrian struggled between desire and conscience. On the one hand, Julia was the luminous anchor in his life, kind, gentle, and carrying his child. On the other hand, Selina's allure was electric, offering escapades fueled by reckless passion. It wasn't a competition of love, so much as a twisted addiction to danger and a fear of losing control. As Julia's pregnancy advanced, Adrian found it harder to feign normalcy. His elaborate business travel alibis to see Selena began to unravel. He realized the precarious situation he was in, but felt powerless to extricate himself. Selena demanded more and more time, more attention, more lavish gifts. She was a presence he could neither fully banish nor publicly acknowledge. A particularly fateful evening arrived when Adrian, under the pretense of late-night negotiations, escaped to a hidden suite at the Four Seasons. Selena waited for him in a robe, the city lights painting her silhouette in gold. Their conversation was heated. Selena wanted a promise of future commitment, not scraps of time stolen from Adrian's busy schedule. She threatened to reveal their affair if he didn't take her seriously. Stressed, exhausted, and fueled by conflicting emotions, Adrian lost his temper. "Do you have any idea what's at stake here?" he hissed. "I can't leave Julia. She's pregnant with my child." Selena's face tightened, her lips twisting in resentment. "And you think that matters to me? I'm tired of your excuses, Adrian. Either end it with her, or I'll ruin everything you hold dear." His phone buzzed. It was Julia. He ignored it. "Why won't you understand I need time?" he growled, raking a hand through his hair. Selena narrowed her eyes. "You're the one who started all this. Now you need to fix it, one way or another." That night, Adrian left Selena's suite in a whirlwind of guilt and dread. Returning to his penthouse, he found Julia dozing on the sofa, hugging a baby blanket she had crocheted. Guilt stabbed him mercilessly. He wanted to hold her, to apologize, to promise he'd never hurt her again, but no words formed on his lips. Julia stirred. Seeing him, she attempted a gentle smile, though her eyes were clouded with worry. "Is everything okay?" "Long night," he mumbled, kissing her forehead. But even in the darkness, Julia sensed the distance between them. She placed her hand on her stomach, feeling the faint kicks of the baby inside, and wondered if she would ever truly understand the man she married. The tension in the Morgan penthouse became almost palpable. Julia, now in her 7th month of pregnancy, tried to preserve a facade of calm. She attended childbirth classes and meticulously organized baby clothes into drawers, finding solace in these tasks. Yet her mind buzzed with lingering questions about Adrian's late-night absences and the whiff of Chanel perfume on his suit jackets. It wasn't just Julia who felt the strain. The household staff, usually quiet and discreet, sensed the growing unease. The driver, Cameron Lee, once witnessed Adrian dropping Selena off 3 blocks from the penthouse, instructing him sternly never to mention it. The housekeeper, Pamela Green, noticed an unfamiliar lipstick stain on Adrian's collar. Both employees tried to remain loyal. After all, Adrian paid their salaries. But whispers circulated within the walls, an undercurrent of scandal that nobody dared to confront openly. Julia's best friend Amelia noticed the difference in Julia's demeanor immediately. Gone was the radiant smile that had lit up the wedding photos. Instead, Julia seemed exhausted and weighed down by an invisible burden. After another medical checkup, where Julia learned her blood pressure was slightly elevated, Amelia confronted her in the clinic's parking lot. "Julia, you can't keep ignoring this." "What if he's lying to you?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling with both compassion and frustration. "You're pregnant. You need stability, not unanswered questions." Julia swallowed hard, tears brimming. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Confronting him feels like stepping into a nightmare." Nevertheless, under Amelia's encouragement, Julia decided to directly address her concerns with Adrian. One evening, she set up a small dinner on their balcony overlooking Central Park. Candles flickered in the twilight. Adrian arrived late as usual, tie askew, jacket wrinkled. The moment he saw the table, his gaze filled with apprehension. "What's all this?" he asked, his tone attempting nonchalance. Julia offered him a sad smile. We need to talk. Adrian slumped into a chair, eyes darting warily. Julia began slowly. I feel like we're living in two different worlds. You disappear at random times, come home with excuses I can't verify, and I can't remember the last time we had a real conversation. He sighed heavily, but before he could respond, she continued. Adrian, we're about to become parents. If something's going on, anything I need to know. A flicker of guilt crossed his features, but he masked it quickly. There's nothing going on, he insisted. The market is volatile. I'm juggling multiple deals, and I'm trying to ensure our future is secure. Trust me. Julia looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. She wanted so badly to believe him. She reached out to hold his hand, which he clutched tightly in return, as though it were a lifeline. I do trust you, she said in a near whisper, tears escaping down her cheeks. But please, don't push me away. I'm scared, Adrian. Scared of losing you, and scared of bringing a child into this world without a stable home. He squeezed her hand again. You won't lose me, he vowed. I promise. I love you. Everything I do is for us. That night, Adrian stayed with Julia, and for a few hours they found an uneasy truce, each clinging to the hope that love could overpower the lies that shadowed them. Selina Clark was growing impatient with her role in the shadows. She craved attention, especially from Adrian, whose wealth and influence had become an intoxicating obsession. Late one evening, she decided to escalate matters. She arrived unannounced at the ground floor of Morgan Tower, a luxury condominium Adrian partially owned, and waited in the lobby, draped in an emerald green silk dress that clung to her figure. When Adrian finally emerged from a late board meeting, his face paled at the sight of her. Selina, what are you doing here? He hissed, guiding her to a quieter corner. I'm done waiting, Selina declared. I'm not just some fling you can keep hidden. Either you make room for me in your life, or I'll make sure Julia finds out exactly who I am. Panic surged through him. Lower your voice, he snapped. I've told you before, this is complicated. Uncomplicated, she said, crossing her arms, her gaze resolute. The ultimatum rang in his head like an alarm bell. Adrian's mind raced with potential consequences, not least of which was the impact on Julia's health. If she discovered everything now, in her vulnerable state, what stress might that cause the pregnancy? And what of Adrian's carefully curated public image, which was tied so closely to his business relationships? Selina threatened to blow it all apart, but the more he tried to placate her, the more unyielding she became. Growing bolder, Selina decided to follow Adrian home, trailing his car through the city's congested streets. She parked at a discreet distance from his penthouse and watched as he entered the building. Her heart throbbed with jealousy at the thought of him returning to Julia, the glowing mother-to-be. Her jealousy spiraled into hatred. She imagined a life in Adrian's penthouse, with designer clothes in the walk-in closets and the social status of being with one of New York's wealthiest men. Instead, she remained hidden, forced to exist in stolen moments. She seethed, pulling out her phone to see if Adrian would message her an apology or an invitation. Nothing. Finally, in a moment of impulsive rage, Selina texted Adrian, Julia's not the only one who's pregnant, what if I was? Would that matter to you? It was a lie, a manipulative ploy, but one she hoped would jolt him. Adrian read the message at nearly 2 a.m. after Julia had fallen asleep. Fear and a twisted sense of responsibility clashed within him. He typed several replies, but deleted them before sending. What if Selina wasn't lying? The timing couldn't be worse. Meanwhile, in the darkness of the penthouse bedroom, Julia turned over in her sleep, feeling a pang of discomfort and an odd cramp in her abdomen. She stirred, reached out for Adrian, and found him awake, phone in hand. Can't sleep? She murmured, her voice drowsy. He forced a smile. Just checking an email. Julia frowned slightly, but let her eyes close again. As she drifted off, Adrian stared at the phone, grappling with 1,000 scenarios. One way or another, Selina wasn't going away. Only days later, Selina pushed her bluff even further. In a moment of vengeful desperation, she decided to confront Julia directly. She learned that Julia frequented a prenatal yoga class at an upscale fitness studio near Central Park. Timing her arrival to coincide with the end of the class, Selina waited in the lobby, her heart racing with adrenaline-fueled purpose. Julia emerged, looking serene and content if a bit weary. Her baby bump was now unmistakable, and she carried a gym bag slung over her shoulder. The moment Julia spotted Selina, a flicker of recognition lit her eyes. She remembered that face from the fundraising event, the mysterious woman slipping something into Adrian's pocket. Selina stepped forward with a practiced graciousness. "Julia Morgan, right?" she asked, pretending to be starstruck. "I've seen you in the society pages. You're married to Adrian Morgan?" Julia nodded warily, her posture stiff. "Yes, that's me." "And you are?" Selina offered a tight-lipped smile. "Selina Clark, I'm a friend of Adrian's. I've been meaning to get in touch with you." Alarm bells rang in Julia's head. "Is something wrong?" Selina blinked, feigning concern. "I hate to bring this up so abruptly, but I thought you should know. I might be pregnant, and there's a possibility Adrian is the father." The air seemed to freeze. Julia stood frozen, her hand involuntarily moving to cradle her own belly. It took her a moment to register Selina's words. Blood drained from her face as she felt her world teeter on the brink. Selina continued, her tone theatrical. "I feel terrible even saying this, but I couldn't keep it to myself any longer. Adrian's been so distant. I was hoping we could figure out a solution woman to woman." Julia's voice quivered when she finally mustered a response. "This can't be true. Adrian would never." Selina sighed, lowering her gaze. "I'm sorry. I truly am. I don't want to cause you any more stress, especially in your condition. But I thought you deserved the truth. If you want proof, I have photos of us together. Dates and times. I can share them if you need." Julia felt as if she might collapse. She took a shaky step backward, her hand clenched around the gym bag strap. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, sending ripples of panic through her body. How could Adrian do this? How could he leave her so vulnerable while possibly fathering another child with another woman? Tears stung her eyes. Why are you telling me this now?" Selina's carefully crafted mask of sympathy hardened. "Because I'm sick of being a secret." Her voice trembled with venomous resentment. "I've been cast aside too long. I'm done living like a pariah while the two of you play happy family." Julia swayed unsteadily, a roaring in her ears. She felt sick to her stomach, more than just morning sickness or the usual pregnancy aches. This was heartbreak, betrayal, and fury colliding all at once. Before Julia could reply, Selina's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, Adrian calling. She gave Julia one last pitying look and walked away, picking up the call. Julia stared after her, speechless, tears running down her cheeks as her mind spun in desperate circles. Julia cancelled her driver and decided to walk home, desperate for fresh air to clear her thoughts. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time she reached the penthouse, her head pounded with a migraine, and her abdomen cramped ominously. She trudged into the dimly lit foyer, ignoring the housekeeper's concerned greeting and heading straight for the bedroom. Collapsing onto the bed, she clutched her phone in trembling fingers. Should she call Adrian? Part of her ached to hear his voice, to get an explanation, a denial, a reassurance, anything. Yet another part of her seethed with anger and betrayal. Finally, mustering her courage, she dialed his number. The call rang out and went to voicemail. She tried again, then again. Each time, the silence grew more oppressive. After her third attempt, a cold, automated voice informed her that the call could not be completed. He had blocked her number. The shock reverberated through Julia's chest. She couldn't believe he would go that far. Tears burned her eyes as she dropped the phone on the bed. She felt overwhelmed by a sense of abandonment, her anxiety spiking her pulse. The baby kicked, and she rubbed her stomach, whispering, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." As the hours crept by, Julia's worry turned into desperation. The cramps in her abdomen intensified, occasionally flaring into a stabbing pain that took her breath away. She tried to hold out, hoping Adrian would walk through the door, but he never came. When the clock struck midnight, thunder rumbled in the distance, and rain lashed the windows. The city's glittering skyline suddenly felt cold and menacing. She called Amelia, but it went to voicemail. Amelia had a flight back to Portland early the next morning and might already be asleep. Attempting to calm her breathing, Julia got up to fetch a glass of water. Halfway across the living room, a sharp pain sliced through her abdomen. Doubling over, she let out a strangled cry. Panic surged as she reached down and felt something wet trickling between her thighs. She flicked on a lamp and saw blood staining her pajama pants. Her mind raced, "No, no, no, this can't be happening." She was only at 34 weeks. The baby wasn't due for another month and a half. Her heart thundered as she imagined the worst-case scenarios. She needed help immediately. Gripping the phone, she tried Adrian's number one last time. Even though she knew he had blocked her, it went straight to voicemail. Each ring echoed like a cruel taunt, reminding her that the father of her child was unavailable. Perhaps he was with Selena, lost in her arms while Julia was here, bleeding and alone. Terror and heartbreak overwhelmed her. She pressed 911, describing the situation through sobs, clinging to consciousness with every breath. The operator dispatched an ambulance. Julia stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face, her free hand protectively cradling her belly. She prayed the baby would be all right. Paramedics arrived within minutes, carrying Julia out on a stretcher through the private elevator typically reserved for high-profile tenants. Each jolt rattled her, fear coursing through her veins as she tried to stay conscious. In the ambulance, a female EMT tried to calm her by holding her hand and saying, "You're going to be okay, ma'am. We'll get you and your baby the help you need." Still, Julia couldn't repress her frantic thoughts. Where is Adrian? How could he block me at a time like this? At the hospital, Dr. Harold Jacobs, a seasoned obstetrician who knew Julia's case well, sprang into action. He ordered an emergency ultrasound, suspecting placental abruption or some other complication. Julia whimpered in pain as the staff hurried about, hooking her up to the fourth lines, measuring her vitals. She heard beeping monitors, saw bright lights overhead, and felt the cold sting of antiseptic. "Stay with me, Julia," Dr. Jacobs encouraged, voice firm but gentle. "We may need to consider an emergency C-section. Let's see what the scans show." Tears blurred her vision. She nodded, forcing her breathing to slow, focusing on the baby's survival. In the swirl of chaos, she handed her phone to a nurse named Meredith, pleading, "Please, call my husband, Adrian Morgan. Tell him I'm here. I need him." Meredith tried, but Adrian's phone remained unreachable. She left voicemails and text messages, each laced with urgency. In a fluorescent-lit waiting area, Amelia arrived, breathless and distraught. She had picked up the hospital's call just before boarding her flight. Rushing to Julia's side, she clutched her hand. "I'm here, Jules," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I'm not leaving you." Julia's relief at seeing her friend was immediate, although overshadowed by the severity of her condition. She felt surges of pain, each stronger than the last. The ultrasound revealed evidence of internal bleeding and signs the baby might be in distress. Without hesitation, Dr. Jacobs called for an emergency C-section. They rushed her to the operating room, a sterile chamber of gleaming instruments and masked faces. Amelia stood outside, trembling as she watched medical staff whisk her best friend into surgery. Inside, Julia felt the heavy weight of anesthesia dulling her senses. The overhead lights turned into a kaleidoscope of blurred shapes. She heard muffled voices, Doctor. Jacobs instructing the team to be careful, a nurse counting instruments, another nurse announcing the baby's heart rate. Time stretched and warped. A wave of fatigue threatened to pull her under. She wanted Adrian there, to hold her hand and reassure her that everything would be fine. Instead, she had only the chaotic symphony of beeps and hurried whispers. But the maternal instinct to protect her child surged within her, lighting a fire in her soul. Hold on, she told herself, and the tiny life inside her. We have to make it. We have to be strong. In the sterile stillness of the operating room, time seemed to stand still. Julia drifted in and out of awareness, the anesthesia heavy in her veins. At last, a single miraculous sound pierced the hush, the shrill, tiny wail of a newborn, her baby alive, breathing, calling out to the world. Tears of relief escaped Julia's eyes, dampening the edges of her oxygen mask. She wanted to hold that crying child, to look into those small, vulnerable eyes. The medical team worked with focused urgency to ensure both mother and baby were stable. Doctor Jacobs, face shielded by a surgical mask, carefully lifted the newborn and handed the baby to a pediatric nurse. From behind the sterile curtain, Julia heard words that momentarily soothed her soul. It's a boy. Yet no sooner did she feel that spark of joy than a wave of pain and disorientation crashed over her. She felt a tug in her abdomen and realized that her bleeding was still an issue. The staff had to act quickly to control it. Her heart pounded in fear. Darkness flirted with her vision. Outside in the hospital corridor, Amelia paced with frantic steps, wringing her hands. She tried calling Adrian again, voicemail. Over and over, she left messages. Adrian, your wife just had an emergency C-section. She needs you. Wake up, call me back, do something. Amelia's voice cracked with desperation, echoing in the empty corridor. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Jacobs emerged from the operating room. Amelia rushed up to him, searching his face for answers. She's stable, but it was close, he said, exhaustion etching lines into his features. The baby's in the NICU for observation. He's premature, but we're hopeful. Julia is in recovery now. She lost a significant amount of blood, but we managed to stop it. Amelia pressed a hand to her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Word spread quickly. The hospital staff recognized Julia as the wife of Adrian Morgan, a high-profile figure in the city. Yet the father of the newborn was nowhere in sight. Some of the nurses whispered among themselves, speculating on why Adrian Morgan hadn't rushed to his wife's side. Amelia ignored the gossip and focused on being there for Julia. 2 hours later, Julia began to wake in the recovery room. Her vision was hazy and her throat felt raw from the breathing tube. Amelia's tear-streaked face came into focus first, offering a tight, trembling smile. You're okay, Amelia said, voice shaking. The baby's in the NICU, but he's strong. Doctor Jacobs said you both pulled through like warriors. Julia tried to speak, but her voice emerged as a raspy whisper. Adrian, did he? Amelia shook her head, her frustration evident. He's not here, Julia. He's not answering his phone, but we'll keep trying. The impact of those words tore through Julia. The man she married, the father of her child, had abandoned her in her moment of greatest need. No illusions remained. The truth was brutal and undeniable. She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. A swirl of relief, anger, heartbreak, and maternal love fought for control inside her. She didn't know what her next steps would be, only that life had irrevocably changed. When Adrian finally stirred that morning, it was nearly 10 a.m. He awoke in Selina's lavish apartment, disoriented by the bright sunshine pouring through the blinds. The events of the night before flooded back. He had silenced Julia's calls in a moment of panic. His phone had continued buzzing, and he'd eventually switched it off altogether to escape his conscience. With a pounding headache, he reached for his phone. Instantly, dozens of missed calls and voicemails bombarded him, most from Amelia, and a few from unknown numbers, likely the hospital. Dread lodged itself in his throat. A trembling finger pressed play on Amelia's last voicemail. Her voice was ragged with desperation. "Adrian, how could you do this? Julia almost died. Your son is in the NICU. Wake up and face the consequences." A bolt of terror shot through him. He lurched out of bed, startling Selina awake. "What is it?" she mumbled, eyes half closed. His mind reeled, panic surging like a tidal wave. "Julia, the baby, I need to go." Selina's eyes narrowed. "You're leaving me again to go play hero?" He shot her a furious glare. "My wife almost died. My child was born prematurely." Without waiting for a response, Adrian scrambled into his clothes. Selina's protestations trailed him to the front door, but he ignored them, sprinting to his car. He sped through the congested Manhattan traffic, adrenaline pounding in his veins. The magnitude of his betrayal now glared at him like headlights on a dark road. At the hospital, he rushed inside, seeking directions to Julia's room. Nurses cast him disapproving looks, recognizing him from earlier gossip. When he reached the recovery ward, he found Amelia stationed by the door, arms crossed, eyes filled with an icy contempt. "How dare you?" she hissed, blocking his way. "Julia begged for you. She nearly bled to death while you were." Her voice cracked, the anger laced with heartbreak. Adrian's eyes lowered in shame, tears threatening to surface. "I made a mistake," he managed, voice shaky. "I need to see her." Amelia glared at him for a moment that felt eternal, then reluctantly stepped aside, her expression etched with scorn. "If you cause her any more pain, I swear you will regret it." Adrian entered the room. The sight of Julia, pale, frail, yet somehow still beautiful, shook him to the core. Her hair lay limp against the pillow, and she stared blankly at the ceiling, lost in thoughts too heavy to name. At the sound of his footsteps, her gaze shifted, and her eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and profound hurt. He edged closer, but she turned her face away. "Don't," she whispered, barely audible. "You weren't there. You blocked me, Adrian. I almost died." His voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I was busy." She spat the word, tears pooling in her eyes. "I was bleeding in our home, calling for you, and you blocked me. Our son could have died." The sharpness of her words left him silent, guilt crushing him like a vice. He tried to grasp her hand, but she pulled it away, her expression set in determined heartbreak. In that moment, Adrian realized the gravity of his choices. There might be no way to undo what he'd done. Adrian sat by Julia's hospital bed, though she refused to look at him. In her silence, he felt the world caving in. He attempted to defend himself, but every justification sounded hollow even to his own ears. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Julia finally turned her head, her eyes brimming with tears. "I know about Selina," she said, voice trembling. "She confronted me after yoga. She said she might be pregnant with your child." Adrian's face went ashen. "Julia, it's complicated." "Selina isn't." She cut him off, her voice taut with anger. "Complicated? She told me she's been with you for months, even before we got married." "Is that true?" The weight of his betrayal pressed down on him. He couldn't bring himself to lie any longer. "We had a relationship, but it was over." "She was threatening me." Julia laughed bitterly, though tears slipped down her cheeks. "Over? And yet you were with her last night when I needed you most." "She told me everything, Adrian. She showed me pictures." receipts for hotel rooms. She wasn't lying. He hung his head, struggling to breathe. Yes, yes, it's true. I never meant for it to go this far. I was caught up, and You were caught up, Julia repeated in disbelief. And now your son is in the NICU, fighting to breathe. I had to beg strangers for help while you were off with her. Her voice cracked with heartbreak. Guilt consumed Adrian as he glanced around the stark hospital room, the monitors beeping ominously. He realized he might have lost the only person who truly loved him for who he was and jeopardized his own child's life in the process. Amelia entered, leaning against the doorframe. "Julia, the NICU nurse says you can see the baby soon," she said gently, then shot Adrian a scathing look. "He's stable, but very premature. They're keeping a close eye on his lungs." Julia's expression softened at the mention of her son. She tried to sit up, wincing in pain. Adrian instinctively reached out to help, but she recoiled. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice choked by tears. Seeing the extent of her pain, Amelia helped Julia swing her legs over the bed. In that moment, something inside Adrian snapped. He realized that no matter how much money or power he possessed, he had become utterly helpless in the face of his own moral failure. "I'll make this right," he said, half pleading. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll cut Selena out." Julia let out a derisive laugh, though it was tinged with sadness. "And you think that fixes everything? You blocked me while I was bleeding. You left me to die, Adrian. How do we move past that?" He had no answer, just a hollow sorrow ringing in his chest. As Amelia wheeled Julia down the corridor toward the NICU, Adrian followed behind, an unwelcome shadow. His mind was a storm of regret, replaying every lie he'd told, every moment he could have chosen differently. If there was a path to redemption, he couldn't see it clearly. All he knew was that he wanted to hold his son, to look into the eyes of the life he had nearly lost, and somehow beg for forgiveness that might never come. In the hush of the NICU, monitors beeped softly, and the air smelled of disinfectant. Tiny cries punctured the silence as Julia was wheeled in. The nurse guided her to a small incubator where her baby lay, swaddled in tubes and wires. Adrian stood beside her, tentative and trembling. Julia gazed down at their son, his chest rising and falling rapidly with each delicate breath. He was small and vulnerable, but the flicker of life in his features reminded her of the enormity of motherhood. She felt an overwhelming rush of love, swamping all other emotions for a precious moment. Adrian's eyes welled with tears as he peered at his son. He gently rested his hand against the glass. Every fiber of his being wanted to hold that tiny life, to promise him safety, to vow never to let him or his mother down again. But how could he speak of promises when his previous ones lay shattered? "Have you chosen a name?" the NICU nurse asked gently, clearly trying to bring some comfort into this fractured family moment. Julia glanced at Adrian, a mixture of pain and longing. When she spoke, her voice trembled. "Gabriel. The first one to call him Gabriel." Adrian nodded, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Gabriel," he echoed softly, as though the name itself might offer redemption. For several days, mother and child remained in the hospital, both recovering from the trauma. Adrian stayed nearby, managing business calls from the lobby, bringing Julia meals, desperately trying to prove his commitment. Yet an invisible wall separated him from Julia's trust. She was civil, even grateful for help at times, but her eyes carried a distant, wounded look that never quite softened. On the afternoon they were finally discharged. Amelia came to help escort them home. By then, Gabriel's condition had improved, and he was deemed fit to leave, though he still required extra medical checkups. Julia cradled him in her arms during the drive. Adrian sat in the back seat next to her, silent and unsure of his place in this family. Back at the penthouse, the staff had prepared the nursery, but the atmosphere was tense. Each corridor echoed with unspoken pain. Eventually, Julia turned to Adrian in the living room, speaking words he both dreaded and expected. "I'm going to Portland," she said, her voice quivering. At least for a while, his heart slammed against his ribs. "Julia, please, we can work through this. I'll change. I'll do anything." She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "I can't stay under the same roof, Adrian. Not when the memories of betrayal are everywhere I look. I need space to heal. I need to focus on Gabriel." He wanted to protest, but he saw the steeled resolve in her eyes. So he simply nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. "At least let me provide for you and the baby. Financially, medical care, whatever you need." Julia's face softened, just a touch. "I won't turn you away from your child," she whispered, "but I can't pretend this didn't happen. It's going to take more than money to fix us." As Amelia helped Julia gather essential belongings, Adrian hovered at the edge of the nursery, looking lost and defeated. He watched them pack up Gabriel's things, soft blankets, tiny clothes, each item a stark reminder of the life he should have cherished above all else. When Amelia and Julia walked toward the elevator, Adrian gently stopped Julia, placing a trembling hand on her shoulder. "I love you," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry." Julia's eyes flickered with the raw pain of betrayal. "I loved you too," she murmured, stepping into the elevator. As the door slid shut, Adrian felt as though an entire world was closing behind them. That afternoon, the penthouse was emptier and quieter than ever before. Only the ghost of what might have been lingered in the corners, echoing Adrian's regrets. Now came the hardest part, rebuilding trust, if it was even possible, and trying to be the father his son deserved. After Julia left with baby Gabriel, Adrian wandered aimlessly through the expansive penthouse overlooking Central Park. Once a vibrant home filled with warmth and promises of a future, it had become a painful reminder of his failures. Gabriel's empty crib haunted him, the cheerful nursery murals a stark contrast to the hollowness Adrian now felt. Alone, he finally grasped the depth of his betrayal, not only toward Julia, but toward himself and the life he had envisioned. Determined to break from his destructive path, Adrian immediately ended all contact with Selena. He sent her a curt, final message: "This is over. Stay away from me and my family." He blocked her number, ironically recalling how he'd blocked Julia in her greatest moment of need. Though Selena attempted threats and pleas, Adrian's legal team quickly neutralized her efforts, and she faded from his life as abruptly as she'd entered it. Adrian knew cutting ties with his mistress was only the first step. To reclaim any semblance of honor, he had to prove himself to Julia and Gabriel. After days of self-reflection, he boarded a flight to Portland, arriving unannounced yet humble, fully aware Julia might refuse to see him. He rented a modest car and drove straight to Amelia's townhouse, parking anxiously at the curb. From the porch, Amelia eyed him warily. "You shouldn't be here," she warned, her tone protective. Adrian raised his hands defensively, desperation evident in his eyes. "I just need to see my son. Julia can set any boundaries she wants. I promise I'll respect them." Amelia hesitated, gauging his sincerity, before sighing heavily and stepping aside. "Just don't upset her. She's been through enough." Inside the cozy, warmly decorated home, Julia sat quietly, gently cradling Gabriel in her arms. Her expression tightened upon seeing Adrian, but she said nothing, allowing him a hesitant approach. The tiny infant, peaceful in sleep, stirred something profound within Adrian's chest. Julia reluctantly transferred Gabriel into Adrian's waiting arms, her gaze never leaving her son's delicate face. Holding Gabriel for the first time, Adrian's heart clenched painfully with overwhelming love and deep remorse. Tears blurred his vision. "He's beautiful," Adrian whispered, voice shaking. I'm so sorry, Julia. Julia's gaze remained guarded, her voice soft yet firm. Sorry doesn't change what happened, Adrian. I almost died, alone and scared. Gabriel almost didn't make it. How do we ever move past that? I can't undo the pain, Adrian admitted, his voice heavy with regret. But I can show you every day from now on that I'm committed to being a better man, a better father. She studied him silently, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Finally, she nodded slowly. You can be part of Gabriel's life, but trust will take time if it ever comes at all. In the following weeks, Adrian stayed at a nearby hotel, respecting Julia's need for space. He spent days quietly supporting her, running errands, arranging Gabriel's medical appointments, and handling household tasks without complaint. Slowly, Julia began to notice subtle changes, Adrian's newfound humility, patience, and genuine dedication. He no longer made empty promises. Instead, he quietly followed through with action. Eventually, Julia agreed to return briefly to New York, understanding Adrian's parents, Michael and Teresa, deserved to meet their grandson. Traveling back, the private jet felt strained, yet Adrian's respectful distance comforted Julia somewhat. Back in their penthouse, memories lingered, but Adrian had thoughtfully renovated Gabriel's nursery, softening the environment that once held such pain. Michael and Teresa embraced Gabriel joyfully, expressing genuine remorse to Julia for their son's mistakes. Julia accepted their warmth cautiously, feeling less alone yet cautious about rebuilding any familial ties. Still, watching Adrian with his parents and Gabriel, she glimpsed the compassionate man she'd once loved deeply. Adrian took a leave from business commitments, fully immersing himself in fatherhood, midnight feedings, diaper changes, and learning infant care routines became his new priorities. Each gesture revealed his sincerity, slowly thawing Julia's guarded heart. Yet she maintained firm boundaries, sharing space but never intimacy, always careful to protect herself emotionally. One chilly evening, Julia stood quietly on their balcony, overlooking the glittering city lights. Adrian joined her silently, sensing her lingering doubts and fears. The crisp wind ruffled her hair, her posture fragile yet resilient. He gently reached out, cautiously touching her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. They remained silent for several moments, each absorbing the fragile peace. Finally, Julia spoke softly. I'm not sure I can ever love you the way I used to, Adrian. Trust isn't easily rebuilt once it's shattered. I understand, he whispered, his voice earnest. I'm not expecting forgiveness, but I'm dedicated to earning your respect again, however long that takes. Julia sighed deeply, looking toward the distant skyline. Gabriel deserves stability. I won't deny you a relationship with your son, but I won't rush things with us either. Over subsequent months, Adrian and Julia established a delicate rhythm. He maintained his own quarters, respecting Julia's emotional boundaries, never pressuring or expecting more. Gradually, mutual trust blossomed through shared parenting experiences and cautious friendship. Gabriel thrived, surrounded by warmth from both parents, even if their union remained strained. One afternoon, Julia watched Adrian quietly reading to Gabriel, his gentle voice soothing their son into peaceful slumber. Observing them, she felt her hardened heart soften slightly. Adrian had indeed changed, not superficially, but deeply. The man who'd recklessly broken her trust had become a father driven by sincere responsibility and genuine affection. Later, Adrian found Julia organizing Gabriel's nursery, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you for giving me a chance," he murmured. "I know I can't erase the past, but every day I'll show you how committed I am." She glanced at him, vulnerability visible beneath her guarded surface. "I see that. But some wounds may never fully heal, Adrian. What matters most now is Gabriel." Adrian nodded solemnly. "I won't let either of you down again. Whatever it takes, whatever boundaries you set, I'll respect them. Time continued to pass, each day strengthening their careful alliance. Julia and Adrian didn't return immediately to romantic love. Instead, they rebuilt something deeper, a friendship rooted in mutual respect, honesty, and genuine care. Gabriel became the bond that united their fractured family, guiding them toward gradual healing. One evening, as the setting sun cast a warm glow over the city, Adrian and Julia once again stood quietly together on their balcony. Gabriel nestled comfortably in Julia's arms. Adrian gently placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know we can't change history," he said softly, "but maybe our story isn't over. Maybe, from the pain and heartbreak, we can create something real, something stronger than before." Julia met his gaze steadily, searching his eyes for sincerity. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself to consider possibilities previously unthinkable. "Maybe," she whispered cautiously, "time will tell." Though uncertain, hope glimmered faintly between them, fragile yet undeniable. They had both learned profound lessons through loss and redemption. Their journey forward remained uncertain, paved with scars of past mistakes. But together, united by shared responsibility and unwavering dedication to their son, they dared believe that second chances could emerge even from devastating betrayal. Thank you for joining us on this intense and emotional journey through Julia and Adrian Morgan's tangled lives. As we've seen, betrayal and heartbreak can strike even the wealthiest, most powerful families, reminding us that genuine love and trust should never be taken for granted. In the face of devastating odds, a premature birth, shocking revelations, and shattered dreams, hope still flickers like a small but guiding light. Will Julia ever forgive Adrian? Can a family, broken in the deepest way, rise again? That, dear viewers, is the uncertain road ahead. If this story gripped your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps us continue creating stories filled with raw drama, powerful emotions, and life lessons we can all relate to. Thank you for watching, and remember, even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for redemption if we're brave enough to seek it.